Good morning, and thank you everyone for coming. My name is Laura Silvia Battaglia al-Jalal. I'm an Italian-Yemeni reporter from conflict zones with focus on Iraq and Yemen, and the radio host on the national Italian broadcaster Radio3, Channel 3. And today I have really the honor, I'm really happy and glad to have here Diane Foley. Diane Foley is an amazing human being first. She is an American mother, like says the title, the headline of the book that she wrote with Colum McCann and was translated in Italian by Feltrinelli Publisher with the title Una Madre. You can find some copies over there that already she signed, and then we have also the chance to, you have the chance to spend some time after our meeting with Diane, our conversation with Diane, to talk with her later on. And Diane Foley is the founder, is the president of the Diane Foley Legacy Foundation, which is an amazing organization that since 10 years is advocating and working for the safety of journalists and is working closely with the families of journalists and people who were kidnapped and in some cases were released, in other cases were not, and also to advocate with government and specifically with USA government when it comes this matter. And Diane is also one of the founders of the ACOS Alliance, organization that brings together more than 150 organizations, so it's a big body where media organizations, freelancers from all over the world, NGOs for the safety of journalists are represented, and is exactly the organizations running this panel, as well as other panels here in the festival, and is working a lot to save our space and to care about our lives and our well-being. This is scary time, we can say, for journalists. That's my feeling. We can share our feelings if we want with Diane, of course, and with you as well. But we have a model in front of us, like, which is Jim. Some of us, or people of my generation, journalists of my generation, we crossed our paths with him during the coverage of the Arab Springs in 2011 in Libya and Syria and some other countries. And for the people who never met him, for the young people who don't know his, first of all, Diane, I welcome you, and I ask you if you can tell us who is Jim, how, you know, he grew his passion for journalism, what was his way of dealing with the challenges of his profession, and during the times of the Arab revolutions.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Laura, and thank you all for taking time to come. I'm particularly honored because of all you brave journalists, because you're the ones that continued the fight, continued Jim's legacy of moral courage in so many ways. Jim was an ordinary American who was a curious kid. He loved to read. He was incredibly interested in the world and in people's stories. He really wanted to understand what people thought, what their experience was. So when he found journalism, he was hooked. This is what he wanted to do. He was, and he became increasingly passionate about it. I learned so much from him. And he has challenged me, really, to really understand how foundational journalists are to our freedom and how important the free press is. So I am truly honored to be here today with you.
Thank you, Diane. And there are so many details that are told in this book that you wrote with Colum McCann. And there are many moments in this book where we see you as a mother, you as an advocate for journalists' rights and American citizen rights to be released. And there are a couple of passages of the book, and one for me is extremely revealing when you were waiting for a call. And I could say how many calls you get in all these years, waiting for an answer, waiting to know what was happening to your son. And while you were waiting for this call, your husband told you, "Do we have milk?" And then you opened the fridge, and then your thoughts were wandering in many places, hidden places, and then you don't know exactly how much time you spent with the door of the fridge open. How you cope with all this waiting, and how, when you knew that the other companions of Jim were released, a Spanish journalist, French journalist, and he was killed by ISIS, if I may ask?
Sure. I mean, I think I know from my experience it was an incredibly traumatizing time. I mean, it is always a trauma for a family when a loved one is kidnapped. And I think it's not that dissimilar from some of the trauma that journalists experience when they're in the field, when they're really hearing the stories of people who've lost a lot, lost loved ones. And so that kind of trauma, I think, needs to be recognized. For me, my faith in God and the goodness of others around me, my family and strangers who stepped up at that time in my life, allowed me to continue, really. But I find it helps me working with current families, because this continues, unfortunately. The targeting of, in my case, of Westerners for either wrongful detention or hostage taking continues. And so one of the things the Foley Foundation does is work with families, recognizing that they're under incredible stress. Because they have to continue to live, take care of their families, as well as pray and work for their families, their loved one to come home.
That's one of the reasons why you decided to start the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation. How came in your mind this idea, and how difficult, if it was difficult or not, to establish and make this really happen? How happened?
Well, it mainly happened because I was angry. After Jim died, to be honest, I really felt that I had been betrayed by my government in many ways. I had been told over and over that Jim was their highest priority, when in fact that was not true. The truth was our country was not planning to negotiate and had no plan at all. So after Jim and Stephen Sotloff, Peter Kasich, and Kayla Mueller all were abandoned by our government, I just felt strongly our country had to do better. I think journalists felt that way too, and that's why a lot of the reason the ACOS Alliance came to be, that historic alliance that brings news media together with press freedom groups to protect freelance conflict journalists. So I think when bad things happen, that's often when good people step up. that's often when the best of journalists and the best within our government all stepped up to help me. And together we felt we had to work together to try to improve what was going on at that moment in time.
And from that moment, you never stopped. At the point that we can say that James Foley Legacy Foundation, that organizes so many things, including like a beautiful march, and we can say had and still has an impact on the U.S. Government policies when it comes of citizens who are kidnapped in somewhere in the world. Do you really think that actually a lot was done on this regard? In all these years, we had many cases of U.S. Journalists who were kidnapped or by state actors or non-state actors. Do the policies of the different governments in the U.S. really changed on this regard?
Absolutely, and that's what has been so heartwarming, really. Like I said, when the horror of the public horrific beheadings of those Jim and Stephen and Peter, and abandonment of others in conflict zones or in nation states, it really woke up everyone. And so our advocacy was able to be coupled with that, the goodness of so many others, to really, push the Obama administration to do an all-of-government review, and that's what led to the establishment of the current U.S. hostage entity. And the good news is that through the work of both government and non-government people, more than 100 U.S. nationals have been freed. And so I'm very, very proud of that, because it's been through the hard work of so many people that has allowed that to happen. And our government has really stepped up and is doing their best. It's far from perfect. We must, and that's why how our work continues at the Foley Foundation. We continue to have to work with both Congress and our government and nonprofits to make sure that we protect the rights of innocent Americans, and in our case, and who are targeted simply because they're U.S. nationals. But also, we're finding that now we also have the additional challenge of the need to deter the practice altogether, that, more and more nation states particularly are using that as a weapon, using innocent people as political pawns.
Right, that's something I wish to elaborate with you now. And for people in the audience that don't know, just in case, to underline that, some governments in the world, like the US governments, don't allow, in general, the talks with non-state actors, with Katibas, organizations, terrorist groups. That's one of the main reasons why when a US citizen is kidnapped by this group, in general, what happens is that it's not released. And differently than some governments in Europe, like the Italian government, who always tries to deal with these groups. And what we saw in case of Jim and others, we are seeing now in happen in a massive way. You mentioned the fact that hostages now are a weapon of war. We are seeing this in the Russian-Ukraine case so clearly. And we saw this on the 7th October, what Hamas did, but also how the Israeli government is dealing or not dealing or with the potential release of the hostages from the Gaza Strip. So I wish to understand your thoughts about it. because we never seen this really escalate a lot. So the usage of citizens as weapon of war is becoming one of the first issues in war. What are your thoughts about it as somebody who knew?
Well, to be honest, people have been taken hostage from earliest days. I mean, that's the reality. I think we're more aware of it now. And I think governments, finally, the U.S. has realized its moral responsibility to actually act on behalf of those who are arbitrarily detained or taken hostage abroad. But it is very, very difficult, and it's so true that some nation states are using it more and more, such as Russia, for example. However, Iran and China have been using the targeting of certain people for many, many years. So it's not really a new phenomenon. I think we're more aware of it. And I think we're becoming more deliberate about how to deal with it. I think one of the most important things is that we must come together collaboratively, internationally about it. It's not something we can solve ourselves in the U.S. Like with the, you referred to the problem, the horror in Gaza when Israel was invaded, and the ongoing horror now in the bombing of Gaza. But some people were released because of the collaborative work of people coming together. The U.S. working with Qatar and trying to work with Israel to release many of the people who were held captive. So it requires that kind of collaboration and cooperation for sure.
Knowing that, are you helping at the moment or dealing with some of these cases specifically? And if I may ask, in general, how families, there are like similar patterns in how families deal with what is happening to them when a son, a daughter disappears, we don't know anything, we know that maybe could be released, and then you have to deal with different actors, you know, secret services, government, the press.
I find that most cases are very unique. I mean, there are so many variables. You know, it depends on who the captor is, whether it's a nation state or a terrorist group. It depends a lot on the family, the type of family it is, how close they were to the loved ones. However, the challenges to that family advocates are very similar, very difficult. And even though our country now has a hostage enterprise, if you will, that is supposed to help in these cases, it's still very, very difficult for families to, for example, get their loved one's case be designated as wrongfully detained by our Secretary of State. We have 11 criteria. We have a new law that states criteria that our government should recognize as a wrongful detention, which allows them to have the services of our special envoy for hostage affairs. But it's a rather opaque process. So we have our challenges in our country for sure. But I do feel that we're making progress just because of the number of people who have come home from very complex, difficult situations.
And that's a good news, we can say. But we are now operating in an environment that seems to be hostile to journalists. That's my feeling. The headline in the Washington Post since some years says, "Democracy is dying in the darkness." And maybe it's already dark. What a citizen like you, very close to journalists, can do to help journalists to do better their work? Which kind of chance possibilities we have to gain the trust of the public? What do you think should be done to protect this profession, which is, in my opinion, is like the core of democracy, is something that can protect our society?
I think too many citizens, certainly in the United States, just are ignorant about the value of journalists. Totally ignorant. I know I was in many ways. So I think that we are very challenged, that we need to recognize how foundational journalism, the free press, is to our freedom, to our democracies. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think a lot of it begins with our youth, that I'm particularly interested in our kids learning digital literacy so they really can understand how to know something that's propaganda or disinformation as opposed to the truth. And recognizing their responsibility to be engaged enough to want to hear the truth. So these are very difficult times for journalists, and I feel that journalists are my heroes. You're the ones that are allowing me to be free, to come and go. And we definitely, one of our friends, Molly, this morning was saying that we need a PR campaign for our civilians, that our population needs to recognize the incredible value that you journalists bring to our lives and the freedom that you bring. So we are in crisis, there's no question about it. And that's why the Foley Foundation is very concerned about journalism safety. We do a lot of work, particularly in schools of journalism, so that students might be aware, might not only be learning how to be an accomplished journalist, but also learn how to stay safe in these difficult times, because journalists are targeted. A lot of people don't want our populations to know the truth, to really know how vital these stories of people all over the world and investigation of deep issues are to our freedom. So it is a very concerning time with that.
We will go into the safety issue soon, but before we should ask you, what do you think about people that blame journalists to go as reporters where they should go as witnesses? Often happens to us. Somebody asks you why you're going there. Is it safe or not? There's no reason to go there. Eventually somebody will kidnap you. This will cost to our government. This is something that we hear a lot in Italy when happens. What do you think of them? And what we can do to let them think differently?
I think that's a real challenge. I mean, Jim was, a lot of our family and his dearest friends were angry at him for thinking about going back to Syria. They were, because he had had a 6-week, he was held as a political prisoner for 6 weeks in Libya, and he came home and like, what are you thinking about going back? But Jim understood how vital you are. And as a matter of fact, he challenged me. He was talking about, when he returned from Libya, about physical courage was one thing, but that without moral courage, without the courage to speak truth to power, to be willing to take the risks that a lot of you brave journalists do, we won't have journalism, we won't have democracy. So Jim felt very passionate. He understood the risks if we don't have a free press. So I think it's incumbent on all of us who understand that to make people more and more aware. and to arm our journalists so they're as safe as possible and as resilient as possible, to tap them on the back and tell them the great job they're doing, to encourage our journalists and be grateful, because I don't know where we'd be without you.
You said before somebody has to take some risks, but when there are the risks, there's the chance to do something safely. So you have been supporting ACOS Alliance for years, which was born to spread this culture of safety and a constant dialogues between freelancers as GM and news industry and publishing companies, NGOs, etc. So this year marks the 10th anniversary of the freelance journalist safety principles, signed by both individuals, like me, and organizations. So what should be done, first of all, to protect this safe space that was passionately built over all these 10 years, and also to help freelancers in a world that seems to consider journalism more and more as a threat?
I think I am so proud of Elizabeth and the ACOS Alliance for bringing people together. I mean, you know, a good 10 years ago, journalists were so competitive, you know, news organizations, even nonprofits. But through the work of the Alliance for a Culture of Safety, a lot of the best people in those groups have come together for good, have come together to protect the freelance journalists who are often out on their own. And there are more and more, as you know, freelancers, both in conflict zones and domestically, who really need protection. And so the safety principles are foundational. I think that puts a lot of the responsibility on the freelancers as well as the news organizations. And all of us, all of them need to take responsibility for that safety. So I'm very proud of the work of the ACOS Alliance and for all the good people who've made that possible. I was particularly excited about the panel yesterday that introduced Jess, the journalist, let's see if I can say it, the journalist expert support, safety support, journalist expert safety support. This new app that has been led by a lot of the leaders in the industry, with Michael Christie, who's here in the audience, Joel Simon, Elizabeth, and others. These are the kind of extraordinary things that can happen when we work together. And I'm just so proud of all of you and your willingness to share for the good of journalists and our freedom. I just want to commend you all.
Thank you, Diane, for supporting us. And I invited you all, if you don't know, to go to the ACOS website, to see what the safety principles are. If you are a freelancer, you can sign. And if you are a media industry, you have to sign, can I say that? Because we feel more safe in this way. Before opening to questions, we have 10 minutes. I have a question, a very personal one, to ask you, Diane. Because I know you have a lot of wisdom. And yeah, you have. There are some questions we ask ourselves only in some moments of our lives, maybe when you are a teenager, when you are a kid, looking at the stars, and asking you the fundamental questions of the existence, right? Like who I am, why I'm here, what is this journey for, what is leading this journey to, why this is happening to me. How many times you asked to yourself these questions during the time of the sufferance, and what is life and death for you, Diane?
Well, I think life is challenging. You know, all of us have moments in our lives when we lose. We either fail, we lose loved ones, bad things happen to good people. That's part of our life on this earth. And I think it's at times like that when we choose. We have choices. We can either choose to be bitter, angry at the world, blame everyone for all the bad things that happen in the world, or we can ask for the grace and the strength to try to do better, to try to help the world be a bit better. And I think it's in times like that when ordinary people, all of us, can do extraordinary things. And I think that's the challenge to all of us as human beings, to really dig deep and make the choices for good. It's a challenge, but it's an important one. And I think when we choose to make a difference for others, we have incredible meaning in our lives. And I think it gives us a reason for being in many ways. Just like I think journalism gave Jim a reason for being. I think he knew that it was dangerous. He knew that he could lose his life. He was very aware of the risks. But he also knew how vital it was. And we all need to make those choices to do what we feel is right in life.
Thank you, Diane, for being an inspiration. And also because James lives through you. And thank to you, of course. Yeah, there are questions from the audience. We can pick a couple. We have 7 minutes, so please go ahead. If there's someone, there is a, yeah. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane, for your strengths and your positivity. It's incredible to listen to you. My name is Miroslava Gungadze. My husband was murdered a long time ago in 2000. In the different circumstances, but by the government. I know what you're going through and how difficult it is. However, I want to ask you about how we deal with justice. Majority of the cases in murder of journalists or any harassment of journalists are not investigated in the world. And I think the fact that they're not investigated, it's actually leading to power holders to actually feel, free to do this to others. So my question is about the international justice for journalists. What do you think has to be done? I was trying my way, I got partial justice. However, in general, there is no international mechanism in this kind of cases. What, from your experience, how do you feel about it and what do you think has to be done? Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. And I feel like some sort of accountability and justice is essential if we're ever to deter people from targeting journalists or any human being who may be traveling internationally. So I think we were fortunate, I was in our case, because our FBI was relentless. I mean, they never gave up looking for some of the jihadists who had kidnapped and tortured and eventually killed our son and other Americans. And they were brought to justice thanks to collaboration with the British. But you know what was unfortunate about it is that I don't think, our Department of Justice worked so hard to make that happen. And 2 of the British jihadists were, they're in jail for life. But they didn't make much of a deal about it. It didn't really get in the news. They didn't brag about the big deal it was, because you're so right that international crimes like this are often not resolved at all. And therefore it makes captors brazen about feeling they can continue to do it. Nobody's going to bother me. I'm not going to be held accountable. So that's where we need the leadership of some of our extraordinary attorneys. I think of Kaylin Gallagher and others. I mean, because you're absolutely right. And we need to strengthen the International Court at The Hague. We need to find ways. And it is hugely challenging because it really does think perpetrators can get away with it. It's an excellent point. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Diane. I don't think we have the time to pick another question because we are at the end of the conversation. As we used to say, sometimes, it's difficult to have peace, even inner peace, without justice. And this is relating to nationals, people, but also individuals sometimes. And thank you, Diane, for being as amazing as you are and inspire all of us. So I want to thank you for being here and again talk about what happened to you and also about your support to us and our community. Thank you to the James Legacy Foundation. Thank you for ACOS Alliance for organizing this panel. And to remind you, if you want to have a look or ask Diane to sign the book, A Mother, which is published by Feltrinelli in Italian language, and was brought with Colum McCann. Diane is really happy to have you over there. So we have 5 minutes for meeting directly people in the audience. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.